So, good morning, good afternoon, doesn't matter what you are, guys. This is currently a space to follow up on my first thread. I'm gonna do the space about the thread that started. So, basically, what's going on and why a lot of people suddenly have discovered that there is the gap west of Verbove, southwest actually, and why suddenly instead of taking head on Novoprokopovka, Prokopivka, depending how you want to spell it, Ukrainians are going to go around it. First of all, I posted like already 4 steps. What's going on? I'm not gonna say that I was the first to say that. I just posted it first. Probably Ukrainians know that way before me. They saw how it went in Robotine, and they saw also how deeply problematic that axis is because it's literally backed off by a fortification point. Therefore, they are trying to do, as I said, they would do. You can check the thread when I posted everything. Trying to do the bitter fight, the hardest part by foot mobiles and light vehicles. Why foot mobiles? Why light vehicles? Why circumvallating Robotine? Why trying to get under Verbove and so on and so on? That's what I'm going to explain. It's going to be rather short. And backed up actually directly to what one ProTube source, Emil, I posted one of the screenshots, was actually saying the biggest issue of this situation when it comes to what Emil was trying to say, and that's what I was going to post, but I said maybe do a space would be rather more interesting rather than start typing out these things in 280 characters is not enough, and I'm not gonna pay Elon for something that wasn't there. Twitter was so small, the digression. Twitter was about getting it short, getting it compact, saying the things that you want to say, not trying to put dramas. If you wanted to do that, you could always type it, screenshot it, and put it in a thread. However, in this case, Twitter bullshit apart, the biggest problem that we have is that, as I said, the main course of the battle around Robotine is not Ukrainians trying to get a hold of the hamlet. It's a very nice morale booster, and they try to do that 23rd by going there, planting the flag, getting hit the bejesus out of them, and then pretending it was liberated. And more recently, we saw 2 videos. Actually, one of them was even posted by the Russian paratroopers, taking out what many assume to be their own BTR-82A. I made this counterpoint in jest about we don't know whose BTR it is. I don't care in overall that this is a VDV BTR. Why I don't care that this is a VDV BTR? Because it means that Ukrainians, first of all, do not control the south. Of course, dependent on that the Russians themselves apparently are not controlling the center of the city because the BTR was literally destroyed at the center of the city. But this means that, first of all this bullshit by Def Mongol and all those idiots saying that there was no counter, it was a Telegram counter, was false. Second of all, I made a perfect analogy with a very similar situation with a Bradley that actually was lost exactly at the center of the city. It was not filmed by the Ukrainians when it was lost. That's the funny part, because it was part of an attack. Remember that this attack was shooting the building adjacent to the post. You have seen that, protecting a platoon of, or a choke of Ukrainian infantry that were killed and wounded. Well, it's that Bradley that had to pull back because artillery was targeting the area. And the same Bradley actually tried to evacuate wounded from that unit that were put on the side on the house adjacent to the position which was firing, and was hit going out. A second Bradley, I posted the video, got hit by what we think is an ATGM or a FPV drone. It burned nicely. All that is good. But the thing is, the Bradley wasn't pulled out for that long and was hit in similar fashion that the VDV hit with the Lancet their own BTR-82A. Once again, I am not sure about this, but I'm going with the worst case scenario. You know me. But that means exactly that if your Bradley is in the middle of the city, you cannot recover it and you lose people. Well, the BTR being on the middle of the city, just the same. So nobody controls the city, more or less. But it's not true. Actually, as I said, the last trench and about 3 or 4 houses at the very end of the hamlet are in Russian hands, and about 20% of the northern part are in Ukrainian infantry hands. The biggest issue, biggest situation, and Draja, we have him here. Thank you, brother, for the geolocations, because they allow me. I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of people who geolocate. There's Chris, there's a lot of people, but with you, because you follow up on your threads, it can create the whole master view that I used for the thread that we're speaking about right now. So the fact that they are following a pattern of spreading north of Robotine and on an axis that goes from Robotine to Verbove. And this is the funny part. I posted a picture of Jihad Julian, so you know Julian Robke, and the guy says, listen guys, Russians gonna have a problem because the two cities, Robotine and Verbove, are very far away, so if they want to reinforce both, they're gonna be under Ukrainian artillery. I'm like, where is the difference from now? The whole point of the situation is not that these guys were already in Robotine. Most of these people were rotated, and that's also why right now suddenly pro-Ukrainians are discovering that there is also rotation in the Russian units, with VDV replacing Marine Corps and VDV. For about 3 months now, we are hearing that, oh my God, there's no rotation, there's no... No, what happened is very simple. Russians are seeing the situation develop exactly in that point. It needs to be patched, not because it's that much more dangerous than before, but simply the troops in there have given pretty much everything they have. It's 80 days now. They are fighting like lions, honestly, and actually more than 80 days. And what do you need more from these people? So of course there are losses. I already made a thread about it. I'm not going to be shy about saying that there are losses, and these people are getting rotated. And suddenly we discover that instead of calling it a rotation, that was supposed to happen about a month ago or 2 even, because Popov was literally pulled out of his command because he was saying there is no counter battery, there's no rotation. And suddenly we have that. The counter battery issue is something else. I want to speak about that in another space. But suddenly we have this rotation, and everybody said, hey, they're pulling their reserves. I don't think that putting in there the most efficient body of work, in this case the 76 VDV, is a sign that they're throwing the reserves. You cannot not have your reserve doing anything else but stopping the advance, and then literally facilitating a stabilization and redrawing of the front. In this case, they are bringing their troops to push the situation to a step when the Ukrainians are going to commit themselves. At the same time, most Ukrainians now agree that the mid-ground in Bakhmut has reset again, and behold, you have the same situation where the Russians brought their firefighter team. Situation is now a stalemate on both sides, which is not always pleasant. I need to say it's rather problematic, because Klitschivka is still there. It's like on the brink, but there's no advance, so that's already something. And now we get the same logic here. They need to make sure that Robotine not only holds, but also that Ukrainians have to expend the as much firepower as possible in there, and the Ukrainians are refusing to do that. And then that's when you go to what Emil said, that actually all this situation needs to go by a double flanking, and the flanking that, ironically, it's not a flanking. Actually, it's trying to hit between the two towns on a slant, and that is our problem here. What is our problem is that when you look at the very maps that he posted, those maps clearly show that this land is on the lowland. Verbove is located adjacent to a river valley, small valley, of course, but it means that if you want to go through there, you're going to have the same situation that you have with the Vremski Ledge, which means that your major advance is still going to be overlooked on both sides. And the situation for them is not as much to get away from Verbove, because I think that if they want to push there, they're going to be able to do so, with losses, of course. But what they want to do is that to avoid to have a both side fire lane from the Russians hitting them while they're trying to advance on this shallow valley. And this thing, I keep telling it, like, Emil ignores that absolutely. He's speaking about something that you can see on the very same drawing he made. It's not mine, as I told you. It's absolutely not. None of the sources I'm employing for the thread that I was doing this morning comes from me. It's literally what they say and what you can see on the map. You can see on the map that slowly it's evolving into a choke point that they attempted to extend towards the line. And even now they're about, depending on which side, of course, on the Robotine, eastern Robotine axis, they're about 2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers from the line, which is not far if they, do the usual trick, which is assemble a fist and push through. They're gonna be there, or at least be able to go through it in about a week or 10 days. Therefore, the situation is now the following. Why is this thing that a half dimwit like me can see, that the Ukrainians themselves can see, and the Russians also can see, is only picked up right now? While for 80 days we had this senseless attack on Robotine, and overall a loss of life on both sides, of course, but especially on the Ukrainian side, because what is at stake with the Ukrainians is that, as I said back in the day, this needs to be stage one within 2 weeks. So within 2 weeks, these guys need to be at Tokmak. Then they could have time to play, to lay out the depth of the artillery, because Tokmak to the line where it was is about 30 kilometers, 27, I think. So you have the situation where now you are using troops on an axis that is well known, well defended, and you are trying a slant and a feint and an enveloping tactic around Robotine, but which would end exactly at the same spot when it was actually supposed to be early on in the conflict. So basically, you're gonna try to go around Prokopivka and then slide to Solka Balka. The problem is with Solka Balka is that it's exactly the same thing. So you will need another avoidance, because let's say that the Russians do not leave their trenches. Okay, we've seen this hit. By the way, I want to tell that there was a huge fail of whoever was commanding the small platoon that was hit in Prokopivka when the first artillery shell landed on the trench, and then whoever gave the order to leave the trenches killed those guys. Honestly, it's sad, it's bad, but he literally killed them by asking them to just move out of the position, or I don't know what happened. But then they were completely submitted to fragment and pellet artillery from above, which probably wounded and killed most of the guys in there. By the way, I'm going to post a small subject on that. As I said, despite whatever is being said, the cluster ammunition work only when they can hit you on your whole body. So that means that in order for them to work, you need to be fully exposed. That can hit your limbs, your arteries on the legs. Whenever you are not fully exposed, when they hit only the upper body, there is a chance for them to wound you. That's not a problem, it's logical, but it's not fatal. Arkan just posted a two images of one of their guys who was sprayed by Upper's cluster ammunition, and the guy is alive, and he hasn't even bled that much. So the whole point, of course, he's a casualty. We are not discussing that. I always say that they are going to be effective to causing casualties, but so is artillery. And artillery, instead of killing you within a small radius, is going to kill you in a way longer radius, and that is going to cause a lot more problems for whoever is under fire. So once again, what I'm saying here is why suddenly Emil Castellemi is pointing out to a strategy of completely going through the length of the front. Well, first of all, as I explained before, what happened, that was the initial thought for the Ukrainians. They wanted to keep the whole axis shallow to open it to maximum, so the Russians would be forced to defend a way longer front line in there. And that could help them both give them artillery cover from way behind, and also would help them to get them under AD umbrella, which would mean in this case that the helicopters effect, in this case the cam of Mi-28, would be a lot more limited. This situation was worked upon a couple of days, and then they stopped it somewhere in the beginning of August. Why did they stop that? I don't know. And suddenly they were doing this, I don't say kamikaze rushes, but they were making these crazy, deadly marches for the infantry, and these guys would get picked by Bobr. So why exactly did this happen? How exactly did this happen? We don't know. Honestly, nobody's having an understanding who changed the situation. There was this article that suddenly 10 or 11 days ago, the British Chief of Staff spoke with Zaluzhny, and Zaluzhny decided that, okay, we're not doing whatever we're doing, but we're focusing 100% on Zaporizhia, and yada, yada, yada. It doesn't really correspond, but if there was something decided, then in fact, what might have been decided is to change the strategy and to go for something that they both knew they could handle. In this case, what they could handle is that they could send meat in reconnaissance advances, see wherever the Russians were not present, because that's also one thing. Suddenly, on another digression, Tatarigami posted a thread about mocking a US official about how they should rely more with human intelligence and human recon on the ground rather than with drones. The problem here is not exactly what was said. I think that what was exactly said and badly transmitted is that they should push more with these DRG attacks with human reconnaissance of fire positions that would have also preemptively scanned by drones, which is what Ukrainians have always done. When they sense that there is a force that can take over, for them it's easy. They just waltz in there, attack the position and take it. The Russians do just the same. Don't take me wrong, but I think that's the point that was conveyed in there. And somehow, I don't know who misinterpreted it, but basically what happens is that the people were not really willing to, understand the situation and comprehend that both aspects are complementary. They're not, mutually exclusive. But this is one thing that they decided to do, which is press small units, probably 30 guys, so a fire team more or less, or a platoon, 30 guys in advance. These guys start seizing small positions that are not manned by the Russians, because it makes no sense to man a position that is undefensible, or at least you don't need to man right away because the axis of attack is not there. And you could see that because the more the Ukrainians were pressing on Rabotino itself, the more the Russians were putting a salient around them, and you saw that in the forest plantation, forest belt, with the tanks lost, Bradleys lost, infantry lost, and so on and so on. But the more the attack concentrated there, the more the Ukrainians would push unopposed in the middle of this kill zone that I described on the first day 5 days ago. And in the middle of their kill zone, they could set up the situational awareness, see more or less where they could go, probably start putting FPVs also there, because you know you're concentrated. If you're Bobber, for instance, you're concentrated on hitting the supply roads around Robotine, or that go on the other axis for this supply pool that needs to support the Verbove. And of course, it's such a frantic activity that you are busy killing other guys, and these guys just slip more or less through and set these positions. However, once you're done with the others, the ISR job continues, and you spot these idiots because, as I said, the NAS in there is very small. In the thread I literally posted, you go from a rather wide entry of front at 13 kilometers from one spot to the other. Then it narrows down to about 8. Then it narrows again down to about 5. And then at the end right now, we are at less than 2. And another thing, it's not the whole width of the 2 kilometers. There are 2 trenches in parallel that go like that. There is no position in between. Those 2 trenches defend 2 axes. But if we want to be serious, we should literally just put the matter of control on those 2 trenches. Of course, there's fire control in between. I'm not stupid. But I'm saying if you want to speak about control, because all these map designs were exactly doing the same mistake that people in the beginning of the war, when you see Russian troops advance to a certain line, and all the rest behind them was supposed to be controlled. And we saw how badly that situation went, with the Russians controlling a line, not enough troops, line is porous, some DRG passes by, torches 1 or 2 tanks, goes back, you need to recover the line, you open up, even less concentration on the main line, second DRG, third DRG, and then you get the mass attack from Ukrainians because you're weakened enough. This situation, however, is playing in reverse in this case. Both sides are very thin at the tip, which is how you saw 2 different trenches that are looking each other more or less on the same line, about 2.5 kilometers, 2.4 kilometers away from each other, getting hit with the same manner. So on one side, one FPV hits a trench that was supposed to be in the Russian control zone, and on the other side, you have a Ukrainian FPV hitting the Russians exactly where it's supposed to be, so at the tip of the spear. Ironically, this just shows that the front line, as it stands right now, is intertwined because it's an infantry fight. If the artillery or heavy means were deciding the advance, it would be a lot more complicated for these guys to be there. But because both sides right now are doing FPV, mortar sheet, and infantry fights, as I said, it is becoming a coin toss. And this coin toss means that you send these 30 guys to occupy a position, Bobber hunts them down, but another 10 guys occupy a trench very close to the Russians, and suddenly you have a line of control. Of course, it's not that easy. It doesn't work like that, because these guys will need to get resupplied, and we saw what happened. You bring a pickup, it's far more visible, it gets picked up literally, and FPV does the bardak. So this whole situation, I'm not trying to cope or whatever. The situation is, I'm saying as it is. If this is going to be the Ukrainian offensive from now on, which honestly I doubt, they are going to have a huge problem, because you lost about 30 guys in a small, I'd say, saturation line in between Verbove and Rabotino. These guys will need to walk at least 3 to 4 kilometers every day to make it an actual advance, because in 3-4 days you're going to have 16 kilometers, you're not going to be very far from Tokmak. But resupplying these guys is going to be with light-skin vehicles, which are going to be visible. And that is also one of the weaknesses of the Oryx analysis of this counteroffensive in Zaporizhzhia, especially in Zaporizhzhia, because the Ukrainians have understood the very first day they used trucks to try and force a push towards Rabotino, those trucks were hit immediately. They were the lightest armored or no armored assets at all, and they're also the most prized prices for the Russians on the other side. So Ukrainians, at least for this thing, for the mosquito logistics, they aren't interestingly, savvy. They know that the moment you're gonna deploy a larger supply convoy, it's gonna get hit. And even if you lose 2 out of 4 trucks or 3 out of 6 trucks, those 3 trucks then need to go back again, and then they're gonna be hit again. So your attrition rate of critical vehicles is going to be far more pregnant if you start doing that. And this is exactly what I was explaining, that the Ukrainians are using armored vehicles to do their organic logistics and very light vehicles that can replace whenever they want to do the rest. And I pointed that to the picture. They were using a pickup to deliver water and dry rations. Those losses are not on Oryx. Of course, you're going to say, but the Russian side as well. Sure, but the problem is that the Russian side is not depending on those losses to supply. The Russian side is using trucks which are counted by Oryx. So in our view, it's completely imperfect that suddenly you got 40, 50 trucks lost, and you say, where's the logistics on the Ukrainian side? And I told you, mosquito logistics with pickups and lighter vehicles, and we have literally the proof of this. And we have then the organic logistics, so basically crates of ammunition and also supply runs made by BMPs and Bradleys. There is a video of a Ukrainian guy going through the trenches next to a BMP. The BMP is littered with green bags, so basically MREs. So once again, the biggest problem for Ukrainians right now, as it stands, is that they cannot they cannot have a proper logistical chain. And this is exactly where a guy like Emil is completely blowing up steam out of his ass. If this fight is going to be an infantry fight, then the Ukrainians would need to do something that they aren't doing right now. They are very afraid of doing, which is bringing more artillery assets to the T line. You got the L line and you got a T line on a artillery asset, be that tank, SPG, those artillery. The T line is the tank line, which is that you can have a loss, so basically a line of sight on your target. This line of sight from the tank can be, I'd say, an indirect line of sight with a direct asset. So basically, I get up on my tank with a binocular. I see through. My elevation allows me to see more or less where the target should be, and then I confirm this with a drone. This means that I can see where I should aim my gun because there are artillery sights on the gun, and I can see more or less where I'm going to hit. Of course, the drone is going to have a target control, which will say left, right, half a gradient, a quarter of gradient, whatever, doesn't matter. And then you got pure non-line of sight, and pure non-line of sight is what both sides are doing right now with their tanks, and that's the L line. The L line most of the time right now is about 6 kilometers, and the T line is about 3 to 4 kilometers. This L side, this L line, now it has to be manned by artillery, and we're seeing this in Klishivka, in Bakhmut. You got very, 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 very heavy assets being between 8 and 13 kilometers from their target. And of course, people say, yeah, but they need to hit in the Russian rear. It doesn't matter. What they need to do is to support the advance of your guys, not to try and hit the artillery on the other side, because the closer you come, the closer also to the line you become. And so the other side can hit you as well. And this is the problem with this overlapping ranges. And if they start pulling these tanks and these guns and these SPGs too close, they are going to extol on them exactly what they were have been doing on the Russians for like almost 3 months now. which is keep hitting artillery assets. I'm going to repeat it. Keep hitting artillery.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Assets within the total range. And if they come closer, and now suddenly every single asset from the Russian side, FPVs from Block, Lancets, Krasnopols can hit them back, then the whole supposedly advantage, because this is the funny thing, a lot of guys have been complaining about counter battery, while in fact it was about range and about ISR, not that much about counter battery. But right now you're going to have a lot of counter battery targets. So I'm not sure that Ukrainians want to do that. And that's why the first attack to our Verbove with the shallow front was a lot more interesting, because the artillery could sit literally back and then fire, 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 fire. Of course, relocation and so on. But now the biggest problem is that if you want to do this deep push, you need to bring the artillery closer, because your heavy fire support vehicles, your tanks, your Bradleys, etc., they don't cut it anymore. You can use FPVs to clear trenches, but the other side does the same. So in order to support your infantry without direct assets on the ground, your tanks need to be closer, your artillery needs to be closer, and it needs to fire a lot more. You fire more, you get noticed, you get hit back. And this is why I think the pregnance of going through this line, the first line, is literally a Faustian deal for the Ukrainians. If it works, once again, if it works, okay. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. I literally said in the thread 5 days ago that so far it works for them, because the Russians are not trying to hit the infantry with the artillery because they feel the bait. On the other side, they are hitting them with FPVs because those are cheaper, they can be far more precise as well, and also far more silent. So you can literally hide in the bush, launch your FPV, stay there, sit there, see who the hell is in the area, and when a cluster is forming, just hit them. And deny movement, deny supplies, etc., etc., etc. But this situation, for the Ukrainian side, if it doesn't work, is going to have a very, very deep, long-term consequence. Because right now, you are losing about, let's be honest, from what Oryx has found, about 7, 8 artillery assets per month on that area. And while the Russians have been losing about 20 per month, 21, let's say, to be honest. Most of them lost in the first month and a half, but okay, 21 a month against 7 a month. This situation, when you right now, is already a problem, because you cannot use the artillery as you want on the Rabotino area. This is why you lost so many mobility assets, so many maneuver assets as Ukrainians. But if now you are not going to use those assets, but you're going to use artillery plus infantry to do that job, what, once again, I'm going to say, Wagner was doing in Bakhmut, you are going to incur a lot more losses. And those more losses in artillery especially are going to bite you in the long term, because let's say suddenly, instead of losing 7 a month, you lose 17 for that area. You are going to have a lot less fire missions, or a lot more fire missions from the same guns and the same positions. This is what happens when your artillery positions get degraded. Now you have only 7 that you lose per month, right? Once again, these are Oryx numbers, don't get at me. You have 7, and your whole battery, let's say for the 3 brigades that have artillery assets in the area with the correct range, so a 52L or a 39L 155 millimeter artillery gun, suddenly, once again, suddenly, you lose the 7, you have 21 guns at disposal, or let's say 28. Losing 7 is not that bad. It's okay. It's 1/4. You can always call another brigade to help you out with that, or always pull out other guns, maybe less efficient, but you can still have it. We have seen that a lot of Godzikas are being hit. But now, this replacement rate makes like your guns that initially were 28, let's say, were firing about 10 fire missions a day. Those 10 fire missions meant 100 rounds. This is all an illustration, doesn't mean just to show you guys how it goes. You got 28, 10 fire missions, 2,800 rounds for your whole month. It's good. Life is good. You are good. You lose your seven guns. Suddenly, your potential fire missions on your slate, your logical slate, so 10 by 10, are 2,100 maximum. But you needed those 700 more rounds to be able to support your artillery, your infantry, your whatever. And now, you still need to hold those numbers with the same artillery. It means that either you're going to have to shorten the stay on positions because you need 700 more, it's like 25% more for the same guns. You're going to start overheating. So on top of the excessive usage of the same battery, if it's not replaced, of course, you are going to also be a lot more obvious because you have less guns to be in more positions. Before, those guns had enough of their stock. So they would fire their stock, and then you move the guns, replace the stock on the position, and replace the gun on whatever you want to do. Now, the same guns need to move to a lot more places. If they're tracked vehicles, a lot more usage, and also you are going to show your tracks a lot more. Before, 5 guns, 10 guns, 14 guns, whatever, to cover a line of 30 kilometers, let's say 14 guns, would have been 2.2 kilometers movement. So they would try to have firing positions at 2.2 in order to have a azimuth coverage. But now, you are a lot less, you need to move a lot more, and then if you replace them in the same axis, your tracks and your movement is going to be a lot more visible from above. And as I said, if you need to fire the 700 more, you will have to have a lag at some point, because once you are firing your ammunition for the position that you occupy initially, you need to go to the other position that was occupied by one of the guns of the battery that was lost. And once again, all these are going to put a pattern to say, okay, how many firing barrels are there? This, of course, is if these guns are not replaced. In my opinion, not everyone's going to get replaced because you don't have them. Especially the 777, they're getting so rare, despite whatever people say. They are supposed to be at the half. We have seen at least half of them getting hit on tape. So all the situation makes that you for 155, you are going to have either a worse gun or no gun at all to replace it. And if you have a Soviet gun replacing a NATO gun, the ammunition for that Soviet gun is going to be different. So another logistical pattern needs to be installed. On top of it, right now they're using rather liberally cluster ammunition that also reduces your range. You cannot fire base bleed at 35 kilometers anymore. You're going to fire between 17 and 24. 17 and 24, if you need to have a buffer zone and also hit beyond the lock, that means that your guns need to be closer. Once again, we go to what's going on with Shivka, what's going on with Caesars, and so on. These guns are coming closer because they are trying to find an ammunition that has less range and denies them the advantage that they had before. They have another advantage now, or supposedly advantage with the scattering of the uppers and the AT effect, but they have less range in absolute terms. So what happens, as I said, if you start losing, instead of losing 7, you lose 17, first of all, you're not losing 25%, but you're losing almost 75% of any given battery for two brigades, because now the brigades are mostly 14-14. But also, your rate of replacement is going to be completely different. You're going to lose firepower in volume and in efficiency, but you also are going to have to, for a moment, concentrate your ammunition to a place when your remaining guns are going to be forced to fire. So, we go back to what we said, and that's where the problem starts for Ukraine. If this strategy is meant to be artillery plus infantry plus whatever bullshit they want to add to it, and they miss the first two steps, which is literally neutralize Russian resistance at the T-line, so basically FPVs in this case, and tanks, but mostly FPVs, they are going to have a very bad time for infantry, because the moment the Russians start understanding the pattern of the artillery placement, Lance is going to rain, Krasno posts are going to rain, and we're going to have to have the situation we have right now, which the last, if you check Nalcio on Twitter, the last 4 weeks actually, the losses are extremely low compared to the previous 8 weeks. I think we should be at 3, 2, 4, and 5. So we're at 14. No, 3, 2, 5, 4. Yeah, we're at 14 guns. While on average, the Russians should have been losing guns and artillery assets. On average, they should have been losing at least 21 point something. So suddenly you have a 30%, 1/3 of the guns that are not shot down or assets that are not destroyed anymore. What happened? Easy logic is there are less assets. Occam's razor, less assets, so less things to destroy. Has this been followed by an advance that would be so dramatic as to explain everything? No. Actually, what has been going on here, what we can see on the tape with the losses and so on, and once again, this is the problem with Nalcio, because there are a lot of things that I don't like with them. For instance, I still haven't seen on Oryx the 3 Alacran mortars, self-propelled mortars that were destroyed. If you can check them on the Oryx page, they're still not there. There are 3 units, artillery units gone. We don't know where exactly they were destroyed, but they're not on Oryx at all. So I'm like, what's going on, these guys? Second part is that the growth in mobility assets on the Russian side showed indeed that there was an attempt to counterattack in multiple positions. But the biggest issue is that we also know that, meanwhile, there were also Ukrainian losses that were not counted. And they were not counted because we didn't know what the hell it was. Now we know there were 2 Bradleys burned last week that are not on the page. There are 2 strikers as well that one is literally damaged in a field. It is still not added. There's only 1 striker and 2 MSVs. So we have these small games, these delays, but at the end they are forced to add the next week, which gives in my opinion, skewed image of what's going on. What's going on right now is the Ukrainians are really pushing to get to the line. They're not too far from it, and they're doing that in a very specific manner, which is going to cause them a lot of, in my opinion, unnecessary losses. In my opinion, they should wait. It's done. Whatever they try to do in Robotine right now is not yet working. It's working besides it. It's working going towards the line, but in Robotine itself, it's not working. And the Russians are not leaving the town as it is. It's a delaying action. It's not. They're not going to recapture the city right now. I'm telling you right away. It would be folly for the Russians to try and recapture the position. It's very sad that they lost two BTRs just trying to pull the flag. And I told you guys that someone went to the school, but the flag is not there anymore. But at the end of the day, the Russians should not take Robotyne. They should defend the axis and make sure that the choke point subsists, that it stays so, that nobody can go beyond that choke point, unless in small numbers, unless on foot. Because going on foot, it would make it a lot easier for the Russians to counter these guys on the long term. Exactly what happened in the multiple incursions they did so far across the Dnieper. And also, it makes it a lot easier for everybody to understand the real power, the real capacity remaining on that axis for the Ukrainian army. Now, there is one main flaw to the Russian defense system right now. That main flaw is that technically, I know that you guys are not going to be happy about it, but technically, the depth that the Ukrainians have attained both in Urozhanye and in Robotyne should allow them, I'm saying technically, once again, don't get me wrong, should allow them to not use artillery, but literally use striking drones. They're deep enough. We know that the range fire for the Cornet D that's being used on the Orion drones is up to 10 kilometers, but mostly they've been trying to strike them between 6 and 8 kilometers. That's already outside of Manpad's range. It's too high even for Manpads to see it. For the RBS, it's 5,500 meters of sailing, theoretically. And for whatever anti-aircraft asset they may use, right now, all that we see destroyed around the area is Strelas. I think there was one Osa and two Buks that are 15 kilometers from the area. So they cannot see the Orion operate, or it's going to be extremely complicated for them to try and do anything to the Orion, because it's going to be at least 25 kilometers outside of their range. So this is what I don't understand. Helicopters are nice because that's what they're doing, but they're lost on the infantry. There is no infantry on the open, that much open, that you can use the helicopters the way they're supposed to be used, and you have to come close enough for a mishap to happen. The latest showdown of the K-52 happened because there was an interlapping line, and nobody knew where the Ukrainian forces were, while the Ukrainians knew perfectly where they were with regard to the helicopter. So this imperfection in knowledge should force the Russians, in my opinion, to, in the worst case scenario, to use aggro drones with bomblets. At least this. FPVs are nice, but the aggro drones is going to make a huge difference. And in the upper echelon, okay, you don't want to use Orion, you have 4 posts. It doesn't matter. 4 posts is so cheap, and you control complete the whole line of supply line and a line of assembly, that you can just lose 1 or 2 just killing off infantry. Exactly what the Azeris were doing at the end with the Armenians. They looked at clusters of 5, 6, 10. They sent a Cap 20, a MAM-L. In this case, you do the same. You see a small cluster, 5, 6 Ukrainians trying to move through. One of those things that I don't understand with the Russians is basically, where the heck are you putting your Rukav? It makes no sense to me to not use them there. Of course, they are being used mostly to the northern line to make some hits, but mostly to direct hits by Tornado S and so. Okay, no problem, bro. But that's not your main problem right now. Your main problem right now is that you have a potential 100 guys a day you can SWAT, and which would also force the Ukrainians, first of all, to recall their piggers back. But most importantly, this is where we want to go. Try to put more anti-aircraft assets near to the front. And they cannot just get away with a small Avenger or some bullshit mounted on a supercar truck or whatever. They would have to put bona fide assets like a book or tours and stuff like that, which means that they're going to be noticed and Lancets are going to go to work. And that's one of the things that Ukrainians right now do not have enough. So, therefore, there are still huge miscues on the Russian side. And also, there are two possibilities in this case. The first, very possible, the Russians are a bit tight in what they want to do right now, and the Kupiansk offensive, or creeping offensive, or a small push, is too juicy right now. They have the Ukrainians to a position where the Ukrainians are literally panicking on the north. I don't say they overrun them, whatever, but they're panicking. Syrskyi literally called for the North Nose to be not to be abandoned. And ironically, Syrskyi did the same thing in Kharkov. So basically, he knew that the Russians had made a choice to defend in the south. And now Ukrainians are faced with the same kind of choice. So this rokad that we are seeing in 2 different years, in my opinion, should be heeded by the Russians and see that, okay, we cannot reaffect some troops and some artillery on the southern front. Let's lose some material. At the end of the day, losing 2, 3, 4 Orions for 300-400 dead Ukrainians and stopping a push around Verbove, it's interesting because there are 2 other possibilities for them at the point. Ukrainians either double down, lose more people, and lose more assets, or they refrain from there and restart the whole stupid and absolutely sluggish offensive elsewhere. So they pack another 10 tanks, go to a minefield, get blown up, go back. And this is where I want to go. I want the Ukrainians to restart probing the whole front again and losing assets on this probing, on these attempts to go through. But this is not happening because the Russians are not forcing them to go away. And that's the second possibility. It's a risky calculus made by the Russians to funnel them back into a shallow valley and make their life hell as it is going to the Vremensky Lich, which, guys, it's also taking 80 days. And the push is barely more efficient. They are fighting for villages like the Russians fought for Mariupol. It's absolutely crazy. We are speaking for a population of about 3,000 to 4,000 people, big max, with all the guys around them. I mean, for fuck's sake, Rabotino is 3 streets. Urozhanye is just the same. So we come with this situation, what I told you, that I'm not saying per se that it is how the defense should work, because nobody wants to lose that many artillery and so on. But it makes sense up to a point, of course. What doesn't make sense, that, as I said, is why they are not going through with the asset that we know they have, and they don't need to throw 20 or 30 strike assets in there. 2 or 3 would suffice, because, as I said, right now they are putting about 10 FPVs on infantry, but with the cab, these guys go to a trench, they hug around to eat or whatever. They don't see the Orion flying, they don't see the cab blazing them, or the Corner D, doesn't matter what's being used. They're gonna feel it when basically blows on them. So once again, I'm repeating my situational problem with the Russians. Why the fuck you have assets, you don't employ them to reduce salients that are creating, especially around the first line? This, once again, is a different story, and we can cry about Shoigu, we can cry about the Russian military industrial complex, we can try also about the slowness of the reaction. It is what it is. That's more or less it. So basically, what I wanted to tell is that I don't expect any big change there. Make a nice change within the 10 days. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I will be the first to admit it. But what is popping out on my radar is that Ukrainians are going to try and introduce a lot of infantry and also basically lose a lot of them. and that's why they're treating the trenches around Novoprokopivka so hard right now, because they want the Russians to pull out of those and try to get into smaller trenches that are far more easily attackable by smaller groups. Let's see how it goes, guys. And that was it. If you have any kind of questions, I'm going to be very short. It's going to be like 20 minutes, and so just ask whatever you want to do, and I'm giving you the voice. No, nobody. Okay. Meanwhile, if you still want to, think whatever you want to ask, I'm gonna add a small point. Remember the 20th of August? I said that in Ozerne they were organizing a wake for 2 pilots. There was one major, one LT. Then about 5 days after, or 6 days after, we have the loss of a pilot. Actually, 3 pilots. In a supposedly air incident that was juice. I literally said in the group that where I said it before, maybe it's a tinfoil hat moment, but it's very weird that the guy serving within the airbase gets killed like a couple of days after this wake is internally announced. So, as I said, maybe they were killed elsewhere or they were killed before, and the whole L-39 incident, mid-air collision, is maybe a cover-up. I don't do conspiracy theories. I just found out either extremely weird that airbase is losing so many people so fast in such circumstances. So yeah, that's what I want to add. So guys, if you want to react, it's now or never. If you don't want, it's not a problem. I see that the usual persons are there. Once again, Draja, huge props, man. I thank you very much for your geolocations, because I start mapping up more or less what's going on. We got our Hungarian G, Gammon, and then Trapped. Trapped, by the way, it's very weird what's going on. Even LA hasn't updated their killed officers. Maybe they're in vacay or something, because for sure yesterday 3 other guys were popped and they're stuck at 2,483. And also there's this stalemate in the posthumous awards since the last couple of days, I think. So it's going to also be a bit more complicated to follow up there as well. Otherwise, since the Americans have basically let out that there are at least 70,000 Ukrainians killed in this war, I've seen a lot of things getting a lot more difficult to verify. And this whole bullshit about the graveyard, the huge graveyard in Kiev, is also a bit fishy. Not because I don't think there are enough dead, but the announcement was extremely public. Of course, we had these talk shows when they say we're going to build a 50,000 cemetery and so on and so on. But yeah, I found like there's something now in the communication going on which makes it extremely complicated for me right now to make sense of a lot of things that has been said. So once again, yeah, guys, if you don't want to, it's okay. I have no issue with that. But if you don't feel like making intervention, it's not a big deal. Thank you very much for being here, and we will see each other probably next couple of days. I will try to do something on Thursday, and then for a couple of days I will not be available. I will tell you why. It has nothing to do with war or whatever. It's just personal. So have a nice day, guys. Thank you very much for being here, and I'll follow up on the thread on Twitter. And I will add some more detailed maps, because right here I cannot just put maps. It would be nice, as people have said multiple times, to make like a podcast or something, including without showing myself. But yeah, maybe in the future. Thank you very much, guys. Once again, as I said, I'm going to repeat it. You don't need to give anything in return. Every guy who has buy me a coffee for information, analysis, or trying to speak the truth, or at least facts, should be doing that either for free, either not do it, and that's it. So once again, I am not here for clout. I'm not here for whatever you might think. I'm here just to tell you what I see, and will never compromise on that. Can make mistakes. I will make mistakes. We're human, but at no point I'm going to start sticking around and coping for things that are not true. Have a nice day. See you next time. Bye, guys.